News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. People young and old gathering in Billings tonight to protest the public schools' mandatory mask policy. The Yellowstone County Courthouse lawn was packed with people demanding the superintendent make masks optional again. That protest comes after teachers and students were denied entry to school buildings for not wearing masks over the first 2 days of school. Q2's Mitch Leakey joins us now for more from the courthouse.
On the Yellowstone County Courthouse lawn in Billings Tuesday night, a group of people gathered in protest of the Billings School District's mandatory mask policy.
We ask you to respect the freedom of choice of your staff and your community. We are parents of these children. We do not co-parent with the government. They are our children.
The protest had two main speakers, Luke Hudson and Jenna McKinney, both at the head of a Facebook group that was started last year in opposition to the limited number of fans allowed at school sporting events.
This is parents rising up to make sure their voices are heard because the school board was not listening. Our superintendent is not listening, but I guarantee you there's elected officials here that are listening.
Tuesday marks 2 days back in class for Billings teachers and students. Upham reversed course 2 days before the start of school, requiring masks after a 6-student outbreak on the Skyview High School football team. Elsie Arnson, State Superintendent of Public Instruction and former Billings teacher of 23 years, spoke at the protest. She said students being barred entry to school buildings is against Article 10 of the Montana Constitution, which outlines that the goal of public education is to grant equal opportunity.
In an educational opportunity, it is demanded by our Constitution. It is demanded. So when school doors shut because you are not wearing a face covering or a medical device or a mask, is that equality in education? No!
In a videotaped instance where a student was denied entry to a school on Monday, the school administrator did offer up a remote learning option for the student. To close protest remarks, Hudson issued an ultimatum to the superintendent. If masks aren't optional by the end of business Friday, a petition will be started up for Upham's removal as superintendent. In Billings, Mitch Leakey, MTN News.
Thank you, Mitch. The protest organizers noted that they stand behind the Billings teachers unions. Billings Public School Board held a virtual meeting this afternoon. Originally, that meeting was scheduled to discuss the budget fund, but for the first 2 hours, the discussion turned to masks. Billings residents were allowed to submit comments to the board, and those comments were then read by the CFO for Billings Public Schools, Craig Van Nice.
I believe as a parent, it's my choice to make informed decisions regarding the health of my children, not his and not yours. I'm asking for you to allow us the freedom to make those decisions. I have a son who was so upset about the mask situation, he started crying before his first day of school. He struggled all last year with anxiety and asthma, all of which seemed to get better once he was out of school without a mask. I have a grandson attending Highland Park Elementary in Billings and was very pleased and much relieved when I heard of the mask mandate for Billings schools. It is so important to protect children, especially those that are unable to have the COVID vaccine. I also remember how excited my family was when we were able to get the polio immunizations. This epidemic can be deadly, and our only defense is the vaccine. Please consider the lives of all the children when you make this decision whether or not to mandate.
Well, the comments, which were limited to 500 words, took well over 2 hours to read. It's not just parents protesting the decision. The Billings Education Association says it has decided to pursue appropriate actions to make sure members' voices are heard. Also calls the superintendent's memo to staff, quote, inappropriate and insulting, although the union doesn't say what actions it plans to take. In a statement, the BAA says our issue lies with the superintendent's disregard of teachers' voices and our contractual language. Montanans honor their word, and the superintendent and school board trustees have failed to do so by continually violating signed agreements. The union says it started each of the last 2 years without a signed contract, which has led to immense anxiety and uncertainty. We reached out to BAA President Douglas Robinson, but have not yet heard back. Well, despite cries to end the mandate, Superintendent Greg Upham stands by his decision. His 3 staff members in Billings Public School System have been placed on administrative leave for refusing to wear masks. That suspension is for 5 days, and they could continue to face progressive discipline if they continue not to wear the masks. Upham also said today that 2 staff members have tested positive for COVID-19, and 2 Skyview students on the volleyball team tested positive as well. It was an outbreak of 6 players on the Skyview football team that triggered the new mask mandate. Despite those few issues with teachers, Upham said for the most part the first 2 days of school have went very well.
All high school students were in today, and they were just super excited to be in school and very respectful, very compliant with the masks. They just went right into school and went to work. It was very wise for us to start the year with masks because I know a lot of people, I don't know a lot of people, but I would assume there will be students and staff that came in with COVID virus. And so I think we did the best precautionary measure we could have.
As another COVID mitigation strategy, the district will offer free testing to any student, staff member, or their immediate household family members. Today, Governor Greg Gianforte said he does not support another lockdown and will not reinstate a mask policy or mandate vaccines. However, he does encourage Montanans to get the COVID-19 vaccine, saying the proof is in the numbers. MTN's Jonathan Ambarian was at today's news conference and has more.
Governor Greg Gianforte said Tuesday that there's never been a better time for Montanans to get vaccinated against COVID-19, but he continued to stress his opposition to mandating the shot. At a news conference, Gianforte and public health leaders said evidence shows unvaccinated people are at much greater risk from the Delta variant of the coronavirus. The governor praised the FDA's full approval of the Pfizer vaccine, saying it's more evidence of the shot's effectiveness.
The vaccines have been researched. They've been rigorously tested, they are safe, and they work.
But Gianforte said people who are hesitant to get vaccinated aren't likely to be convinced by public figures. He urged them to talk with healthcare providers about getting the shot.
They don't want to hear from me, national figures, interest groups, or even the press. It's not effective. They want to consult with medical providers they trust, their doctor, and their pharmacist.
He said the state of Montana won't implement any mandate for COVID vaccination or return to a mask mandate. The state has reported an uptick in new vaccinations in recent weeks. Gianforte also sharply criticized the Biden administration for their handling of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, saying troops shouldn't have been pulled out before all Americans and their allies were safe from the Taliban.
But our withdrawal was a poorly prepared and rushed calamity, and it leaves many of them at risk.
He said the country has obligations to Afghan interpreters and others who helped U.S. forces, but that it's for local communities to decide how to relocate refugees. Gianforte said he's also pleased with Montana's improving labor force numbers in the months since the state implemented return-to-work bonuses, but he said inflation and COVID are continuing to hold the state's economic recovery back. In Helena, Jonathan Ambarian, MTN News.
Well, as the governor urges more Montanans to get vaccinated, the state surpassed more than 700 cases in a single day for the first time this year. Montana reported 720 new COVID cases today, with Yellowstone County seeing the most with 166. The county now has 639 active cases, which is third in the state, just behind Flathead County and Cascade County. Increasing cases continue to bring an end to some popular Magic City events. Today, Zoo Montana announced that the 2021 Montana Renaissance Festival and Boo at the Zoo will not be held this year. Those are two big losses for the zoo, as the Renaissance Festival, which was scheduled for September 4th and 5th, was expected to draw nearly 8,000 people. Boo at the Zoo, slated for October 30th, normally draws around 5,000 people. All right, turning to Chief Meteorologist Ed McIntosh. And Ed, it certainly seems like the drought worsened quickly in Montana and Wyoming this year, and you've got to look at some of the numbers tonight.
Usually we talk about little snapshots, Russ, from right around Billings, but let's take a look at the whole state from Libby to Ekalaka and Dillon up to Plentywood. So far, if you average all of the reporting stations together, we've got the third warmest July in Montana on record and the fifth warmest in the state of Wyoming. Add to that the areas into the Pacific Northwest from California, Nevada, Oregon, Washington. They've had the hottest July. Now, even though we've seen a bit of a cool down this month, and remember, we went into the winter with a week here in Billings where we never got above zero. We're the 13th warmest year in Montana overall and the 21st warmest year in Wyoming. And adding to all those drought concerns, it's the fourth driest year in Montana back to 1895. Back a look with the forecast in just a few minutes.
Well, the family of a Montana woman who was murdered at a campsite in Utah is calling for answers. 24-year-old Kylan Schulte, who was from Billings, and her wife of about 4 months, 38-year-old Crystal Turner, were living at a campsite in the LaSalle Mountains near Moab when they were found shot to death. Friends said they had mentioned a man creeping them out around their campsite before their deaths.
Saturday that they met up with, they said they were going to go move. They were going to go pack up and move their campsite. That it was like he was still creeping them out. What is very uncomforting is that there 100% is a murderer on the loose.
The FBI has now joined the case to try to help solve the double murder. President Biden says the U.S. intends to stick to the August 31st withdrawal deadline from Afghanistan, adding that it could take longer and an extension could involve military force if necessary. Skylar Henry reports from Washington.
With just a week to go before the U.S. military is due to leave Afghanistan, thousands of people are still waiting to be evacuated from the airport in Kabul.
We are currently on a pace to finish by August the 31st. The sooner we can finish, the better. Each day of operations brings added risk to our troops.
President Biden said the deadline can be met if the Taliban stays out of the way.
The completion by August 31st depends upon the Taliban continuing to cooperate and allow access to the airport.
Taliban leaders say they are no longer allowing Afghan citizens to leave the country.
No.
They're also insisting the U.S. be out by the end of the month. House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy says the situation on the ground should determine the withdrawal schedule.
Don't pick the date. Solve the problem. Make sure every American is out. Then that will be the date we depart.
President Biden said the Pentagon and State Department are preparing contingency plans in case more time is needed. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Washington.
The White House says that more than 70,000 people have been evacuated from Afghanistan since August 14th, the day before the Taliban reclaimed control of the country. Only a fraction of the evacuees hold U.S. passports. Up next on tonight's MTN 10 o'clock news here on Q2.
This here has just turned my life upside down.
Months after being diagnosed with COVID, a Billings woman still struggling with unexplainable symptoms. We'll take a closer look at long haulers in tonight's Your Health Matters.